The survivors realized their days were numbered. Aware that rescue teams had been called off and that food was nowhere to be found, the group reached a grim consensus. Whoever died would allow the others to consume their body once they had passed. This was not a decision made lightly. They prayed before reaching the agreement, uncertain if they could bring themselves to eat their friends, family, and classmates. Yet, it was the only option they had to survive. Before watching this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The tragedy of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. The events surrounding Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, often called the Miracle of the Andes, encompass everything needed for a gripping movie script: a dramatic plane crash, a tragic loss of life, and a survival story against all odds. Add in some horror elements, and you might think the tale of Flight 571 is purely fictional, but it's not. It all truly happened. On October 13, 1972, the Fairchild FHA 227D passenger aircraft was chartered by the Uruguayan amateur rugby team Old Christians Club to transport them to Chile for a match. The twin-engine aircraft carried 40 passengers and 5 crew members, with fewer than half surviving the tragic crash. Those who perished were consumed by the survivors to endure the harsh conditions of the Andes Mountains. But what caused the plane to crash, and how did 16 individuals survive the tragedy? The story begins on October 12, 1972. The Old Christians Club rugby team was in high spirits as they boarded Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, eager to embark on their journey from Montevideo, Uruguay, to Santiago, Chile. Aboard the plane were the rugby players, their friends and family, along with 5 crew members. Chartering the aircraft was costly, so the rugby players invited loved ones to join them on the trip and help share the expenses. The excitement soon diminished when poor weather over the Andes Mountains forced the flight to land in Mendoza, Argentina, until the storm passed. The group stayed there overnight and departed again just after 2 p.m. the following afternoon, when the weather was considered safe for travel. The Fairchild aircraft was designed to reach a maximum altitude of 28,000 feet, making flying through the Andes Mountains perilous. The pilot would have to be precise and careful to avoid crashing the plane if they chose this route to the destination. Instead, the pilot and co-pilot, Colonel Julio Cesar Ferrada and Colonel Dante Hector Laguerara, respectively, plotted an alternate route. They planned a U-shaped route that took them across the Pinchin Pass volcano. Although it added a little more time to the journey than usual, it was designed to ensure everyone got to the destination safely. Unfortunately, this plan would be futile. About an hour after departure, the pilot informed air control that he was crossing the pass and would soon arrive in Curacao, Chile. After traversing the Andes into Chile, the plane was scheduled to head north and begin its descent into Pudahuel Airport in Santiago. This is when events took a turn for the worse. Pilot Julio Ferradas was experienced. He had flown across the Andes nearly 30 times before. The colonel was training co-pilot Dante Laguerara, who was given control of the plane for most, if not all, of the journey. The quality of the plane was a running joke between the pilots. Although the plane was only 4 years old, the airmen knew it was underpowered and referred to it as the lead sled. While this may have been true, it wasn't the lack of power that caused the plane to crash, it was pilot error. Inexperienced co-pilot Laguerara had misjudged the plane's location, believing it to be almost at their destination in Chile. In reality, the plane was still in the Andes. It's believed the co-pilot made this mistake due to cloud cover, which obscured his ability to judge his location accurately. Additionally, he radioed Pudahuel Airport in Chile to request permission to descend. The air traffic controller agreed, unaware that the plane was far from Pudahuel. Instead, it was surrounded by mountains. The plane quickly descended, and once through the clouds, the passengers could see they were near the mountains. They were oblivious to the unusual circumstances, and even when severe turbulence struck, the rugby team joked about it, unaware of the situation's gravity. The pilots, however, recognized the seriousness of the situation by that point. They attempted to ascend, positioning the plane almost vertically to escape the imminent crash. Maximum power was applied to the aircraft to gain altitude, allowing the plane to lift its nose over the ridge, but the tail clipped the mountain. Then, the right wing struck the peak. In the ensuing strikes, the tail end of the plane was lost, which in turn caused 3 passengers and 2 members of the crew to fall out of the enormous hole. The plane was still hurtling forward, though the left wing was soon ripped off. The pilots no longer had control of the aircraft, and 2 more passengers succumbed to the hole in the tail of the plane. Eventually, what was left of the aircraft and its passengers crashed into a snow-filled peak and hurtled over 2,300 feet down the slope. The snowbank below caused the aircraft to stop suddenly, which had been blasting down the mountain at over 200 miles per hour. The impact hit the cockpit first, killing pilot Ferrada instantly. The impact had caused the passenger seats to break free, and people were shot through the air, still strapped in. The Chilean control tower had been attempting to reach the pilots without success when the anticipated landing failed to occur. A search team was dispatched to locate the plane near the Chilean border. However, they were not there. They were in the Andes. The crash claimed the lives of 12 out of the 45 people on the plane. 33 individuals survived the initial impact. Hurt, dazed, and terrified, the survivors emerged from the wreckage and did their best to assess the situation. They were surrounded by snow, had no relief from the freezing temperatures, and had few resources available. They had what remained of the fuselage to offer some minimal shelter from the elements, but that was all. The severely injured survivors scavenged for any food that remained on the plane. Cheese, wine, and chocolate comprised most of what was available. This sustenance helped them create a more comfortable shelter in the fuselage, build a solar-powered water collector using metal salvaged from the wreckage, and fashion makeshift snowshoes from cushions. As the days passed, surviving passengers were slowly realizing some of their loved ones had passed in the accident. Rugby player Nando Pardue lost his mother and sister in the crash. His mother died on impact, and his sister died days later. The food supply was quickly depleted. Within less than a week, there was nothing left for the group to eat. To fill their stomachs, some of the group took to eating the stuffing from the plane seats, which quickly made them sick. A further search of the wreckage saw the group find an AM transistor radio. They used electrical wire foraged from the debris and used this to keep updated with the news reports of the missing plane. The white plane blended in with the snow, meaning rescue teams had flown over the wreck and missed it. To combat this, survivors positioned luggage to spell SOS, though this proved futile. On day 11, via the radio, the group learned the search for them had been called off. As resources dwindled and despair set in due to the absence of search efforts, more members of the group began to die, unable to endure the freezing temperatures and lack of food. 6 passengers passed away in quick succession, and then, 16 days after the crash, on October 29th, another tragedy struck. A massive, unexpected avalanche crashed down on the wreckage, burying what remained of the fuselage in snow. 8 more passengers lost their lives as a result. The survivors realized their days were numbered. Aware that rescue teams had been called off and that food was nowhere to be found, the group reached a grim consensus. Whoever died would allow the others to consume their body once they had passed. This was not a decision made lightly. They prayed before reaching the agreement, uncertain if they could bring themselves to eat their friends, family, and classmates. Yet, It was the only option they had to survive. When the time arrived, the first body, preserved in the freezing snow, was cut into meat by a shard of windshield glass. Medical student Roberto Canessa sensed apprehension in the group and took the first bite as an example. A few others followed suit. With the meager sustenance provided by the flesh, some group members chose to wander further from the wreck in search of a possible escape route. Roberto Canessa, Nando Pardu, and Antonio Vicentin, the most physically fit among them, set out to seek help. Antonio had to return to the wreckage due to ill health, while Roberto and Nando continued their mission, heading east in hopes it would lead them to Chile. The trek was arduous, exhausting, and challenging. Nevertheless, the men persevered and eventually spotted some herdsmen across a river. They shouted to one another, but due to the noise of the water, they couldn't hear each other. Instead, they communicated by wrapping paper around rocks and throwing the messages across. The herdsmen informed the survivors that they would return the next day with help. Hopeful, Roberto and Nando sat by the river all night, waiting for assistance. As promised, the herdsmen returned the following day with aid. They alerted the authorities, and the survivors were rescued. Helicopters were dispatched to retrieve the individuals still trapped beside the wreckage. Naturally, the media was captivated by the incredible story, but eventually, they fixated on one particular aspect, the consumption of human flesh. The media, however, misrepresented the situation, claiming that the survivors had killed others to survive, and pointing to photos taken by the relief corps that showed a half-eaten leg found at the crash site. The survivors had no choice but to acknowledge the acts, emphasizing that they had obtained permission to do so before each person's death. The crash site has become a popular tourist destination, drawing hundreds of visitors. Tourists can pay their respects to those who lost their lives in the Andes. Those who did not survive the tragedy were interred in a 400 by 800 meter grave. Additionally, there is a monument at the site to honor all passengers of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more videos.